there's no pleasure in predicting something like this. You know, we made some pretty intense claims on this podcast before. One is that we're in a holy war,
Yep.
and this is the kickoff moment for that.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future.
What do you want to talk about tonight?
Well, we might as well be topical. There's like this thing going on across the sea that nobody at all is talking about, that you give me an introduction to a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, it doesn't really take, there's no pleasure in predicting something like this, but, you know, we made some pretty intense claims on this podcast before. One is that we're in a holy war,
Yep.
and this is the kickoff moment for that. So I don't remember what episode we talked on it, but yeah, this is pretty intense. It's intense seeing terrorists kill little children and old people. It reminds you a lot more of a more intense 9/11, basically, because I mean, it's like, it's crazy. I don't know what else to say besides that. And then, you know, the response is pretty intense too. There's like no nuance to it. So you have everybody going one side or the other. Yeah, some people basically talking about totally removing Palestine's, it's not just Hamas, but Palestine's right to exist and the two-state solution. That's definitely a trigger point for countries like Saudi Arabia. And you've also seen basically Hamas and Hezbollah kind of go together and show outward support.
Right.
And in the U.S. too, you see a lot of like college students, from what I've seen on the news, right? So, you know, that's very selective. They usually pick the sides that are most likely to evoke emotion on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of the people really don't have any context of this. And, you know, it's pretty interesting. This is definitely singling some people out in our own political system to where they sit on it, specifically some of the members of the squad that they call it. But it's, I think, frankly, the most alarming thing that I've seen is that Netanyahu knew that this was coming, according to Egypt, and did nothing. So, you know, you're not going to necessarily read into things, but I think when the time comes, he's going to be on his way out. I don't think politically, given what, you know, the movement he has put on the judges, basically trying to essentially nullify the power of the Supreme Court in Israel over the last couple months, that this is not going to be a great thing. And, you know, you also have in the U.S. too, the people that are getting paid by the military firms going out and being cheerleaders for utter utter destroyal, and even talking about invading Lebanon too, which
Right.
I understand that rockets are being fired from there, but you have Israel incurring into another country to fight terrorists. Lebanon's leaders saying that they're not going to get involved. Iran's backtracked. You have Lindsey Graham in particular talking about bombing oil infrastructure in Iran to make them pay for it. And I think it's this is one of those times like we saw with Iraq that using a horrible event and not necessarily focusing on the event and just more about literally exterminating your enemies. So, I think this weekend in particular, it's going to be really hot globally, and that's going to probably kick off, if you can't already say that it's kicked off, a period of 6 months to a year of just really some crazy stuff happening over and over again.
So for my benefit, what preempted this specific incident event? Because Israelis and Palestinians and stuff have been arguing since 2,000 years plus. So what's kind of kicked this specific thing off?
Well, Hamas has been leading Gaza since 2007. They haven't had elections since then. So essentially it's like a undemocratic state. They're a designated terrorist group by many countries, including the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And one of their core tenets is to basically wipe out Israel as a state. So essentially it's a continuation of the crusades. And, it's kind of, go back and think about that. This whole war has been going on for 2,000 years. So the first crusade, 1095. So pretty much 1,000 years. You had the Reconquista.
Right.
Also before that, which was Christian versus Muslim. So you've had this Christian and Judaism alignment, basically setting up crusader states over time. Kingdom of Jerusalem, Tripoli.
Well, I was just curious if there's anything specific that set this off. Did Netanyahu do something specifically recently? Even just my study of other terrorist attacks and stuff, there's usually something that's kind of set off the initial chain and everything. And I didn't know if there was anything specific this time.
Netanyahu's tried to consolidate power, and I think perhaps they're distracted. There's a lot of stuff being talked about how Biden gave $6 billion to them, and people are saying that funded attacks, which is not true. But they started planning in August. Egypt, I believe last month, said that it was happening. I don't think it was unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they weren't expecting it and all these, core systems started to fail is pretty alarming.
Right.
So I think there's more alarm in my sense that their stuff didn't work. That's been pretty much impenetrable for quite a while. Even the Iron Dome got overwhelmed, which is their missile system that, I mean, all the time is knocking down rockets. But it's, I don't know. Iran supposedly put the blessing on it. And, what we talked about is that the tensions globally are all over the whack. And then you have, one of the key backers for Israel is the United States. And you have them fighting on multiple fronts right now.
Right.
And then, like, one thing that they're not talking about right now is Armenia, which is the Nagorno-Karabakh is basically a state within Azerbaijan, which is basically ethnic Armenians that are Christians, and you have pretty much a war going on there, and that's pretty much not being talked about. So, you kind of have. It's just funny, like how news works and how it goes, but you really have all over the world right now these religious flashpoints going up, and you also have, well, maybe a consideration too of why they did it now. Israel was convinced to give a lot of their weapons to Ukraine. So now they're basically looking for weapons to defend themselves or / obliterate Gaza.
So it seems like it's a little bit of a planning of, like, they're just waiting for the right opportunity to strike. And there's just some various other things that are going on that said, like, this is the best time to get them while they're down, kick them while they're down, kind of thing.
I don't think anybody really knows.
Right. Well, I'm asking you because you're the predictor and stuff. So
yeah, strategically, it's probably the best time in years, just because they faced a lot of internal strife. Just like if someone, like hope it doesn't happen, but there's a lot of chatter that this weekend, we're recording this on 10/11, so. October
I heard
13th, 14th, and 15th, there might be some potential terrorist attacks in the U.S. So, it's, I mean, you never know with this, but the fact of the matter is, for us specifically, we've had pretty much an open border for years, and they have been capturing people that are terrorists at the border. It's not, I think it's approximately like 10,000 max people that we have coming across the border a day. So we're talking about millions of people entering the U.S. annually right now. And it's really going to be hard to keep track of those people and ensure that they're all safe and here for the right reasons. But this is potentially going to get out of control real quick, globally. And one of the things that we talked about a long time ago is actually how Russia and the United States have a lot in common and should be natural allies. Like, I think strategically over the last couple of years, we've been really thinking about more China and Russia as these core battle areas, and that still is true. But one of the things I talked about is that I think part of Ukraine, since they're oftentimes sending stuff over there that doesn't work, is just moving out our own old inventory of weapons, using those and basically replacing them with newer weapons without getting your your accounts up. So, I mean, that might be a pretty sad way of looking at things, but the fact of the matter is we've replaced a lot of our old inventory
Right.
with newer stuff and built up with over $100 billion that wasn't allocated for spending that's gone to the Ukraine war, but primarily to weapons manufacturers here in the U.S. to increase stuff like artillery production. So I think I don't really know what's going to happen, but I don't see this slowing down. My biggest concern is that Saudi Arabia is going to be pulled into supporting their Arab allies in the region. Syria, like there's a podcast I recorded last week about that I don't think is posted yet, about how America's enemies are basically unifying right now. One of those is Syria, that's unifying with Iran and Venezuela to increase oil production and for weapons manufacturing. You kind of have, frankly, it's all going to shit. So, man, it's been something that's built up for over 1,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
This may be the thing that gets so bad that people swear off religion, just because it really is a religious war. There's no really, I think, any other way to really look at this. You pray for those people in both Israel and Gaza right now who are innocent civilians that are, getting bombed, losing limbs, getting raped,
Right.
their heads cut off, cutting off children's heads. It's barbaric. It's the type of stuff that you saw with ISIS, and that's held over from an old school way of looking at the ways of the world through a religious lens. So in uniformity, it's crusades were much like that too. And it's really, I think the goal with all of these people is exterminating whole lineages. But, you hope everybody wakes up, especially the terrorists, and realizes that this doesn't work. It just kind of eventually continues to promote another cycle. And, everything's going to go to shit, basically. I think it was partially a strategic mistake to send our biggest aircraft carrier with approximately 5,000 people on it and enough weapons to basically eradicate both countries if they wanted to overnight. We're fully committed, basically, the United States.
Right.
So we're not going to let them hang, and Gaza will be leveled. And thousands more people will die probably in the next week or so. We went on this whole terrorism thing, losing 2,000 or so people on 9/11. And this is much more of a brutal personal attack meant to terrorize people. And it just goes to show you, like I don't know if you've seen videos, but paragliders with fans on their back, kind of like people that parachute into the football games. They were suicide paragliders. It just out of a freaking movie, but it's crazy. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it. It's very unfortunate that we're here at this point.
Yeah.
It did go like we thought. And I think, I don't know what necessarily the goal was in Ukraine, besides, kind of the stated goal that some government entities have talked about recently, being economic. But we've definitely shown a lot of our hands and used a lot of our monetary might and firepower over there, and our inventories are low. So, I think I believe that I saw that China tacitly almost supported or basically blamed this on the Americans. And you just see this division globally. It's a story that everybody wanted to write, and it's happened now. So, the Crusades never ended. They've never ended, and we're back where we were before. Just going through the cycle. So we will see. But
Yeah, it's crazy.
But yeah, Gaza is getting leveled right now, and Israel, I think they've got like 600 warplanes. They're a lot of F-35s. They've got a lot of firepower, and they're using it. Netanyahu is a Trump-style character that would want to eradicate his enemies. And I mean, partially maybe to save his own self. So, but it's messy right now. I don't see it letting up. And I see it essentially stoking divisions here in the U.S. too. I think a lot from ignorance. And
yeah, well, the Oklahoma education superintendent sent an email to all teachers basically saying, stand with us as we support Israel because Israel is pro-America and all this stuff. And it's like,
there's a lot of virtue signaling going on.
Yeah.
People are trying to choose the sides and generalize.
I guess I still find it interesting about how there was a time where America wanted nothing to do with Israel, the people, Israeli people and stuff. And then even after they made Israel and helped make Israel a nation, they really didn't want to have anything to do with them. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, Israel is pro-America. And I was like, well, it's pro-America because we help pro-it.
And we give them roughly $4 billion a year.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not stating whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying that, like, we have been more supportive of Israel for, like, whenever it came into the lexicon that they're the chosen nation of God, then it didn't matter if you're Jewish or if you're Christian, and then some groups of Muslim as well, that it's like, oh, well, we've got to support Israel because it's the master country, it's the chosen country. And I'm like, well, interestingly enough, though, Israel also has the most amount of terrorist attacks. Like, they've caused more terrorist attacks via airplane and stuff than any other country since it's become a country.
Yeah, it's it's complicated because everybody wants them dead.
Yeah.
So you have to show their firepower. But it's, I mean, they're an island of itself. They're surrounded by Arabs. And I assume, the peace accords that they're discussing between Saudi and Israel are off.
That makes sense.
And it's complicated. It's kind of like what we have here too with divisive people. A lot of Arabic countries in the Middle East have they're a coalition of tribal houses, almost essentially.
Right.
And a lot of them are extremely conservative. So to maintain power in their own country, they have to tread lightly on certain stuff. And I think everybody is partially correct. But I think, like usual, but I think the thing that it's consensus in is that innocent people shouldn't be killed, should be raped. And the level of terrorism is pretty shocking. So I think this is going to get really messy. And you're really putting people to a point where they have to choose sides, which is, I mean, this might be the thing that breaks the back of a lot of our international post-war institutions, like the UN. I mean, I haven't seen anything about Europe, but I assume the EU is going to have some trouble over the next couple weeks. But a lot of these unvetted migrants may or may not be. I mean, there's a bunch of sleeper cells in the U.S. for a lot of things, not just Palestinian, but it could get really messy. I assume the EU is the same thing. Let's see what this is. There's in East Brussels. Let's see. Oh, Molenbeek has quite a lot of. It's pretty much a no-go zone for police,
Sure.
and many times, a lot of the Islamic extremists have moved to this district east of Brussels, and mostly immigrants from. It's just the tolerant ideals are potentially coming back to bite everybody for the last couple of years. This is what we've seen throughout history, is this battle between East versus West, Islam versus primarily Christianity, and these push-pull points. So when we come to a year or two from now, I wouldn't be surprised if both Russia and the U.S. are allies again, like we talked about, or allies in quotes, strategic allies like they were in World War II, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's religion is, like we talked about with Catholic Church, right? So 1.3 billion members. Religion unites people. It's very deep and emotional, and that's a thread that you can pull that unifies where you can't find unity in anything else. And it's cultural. It's part of your family history. I've got family ties to the Crusades. which is weird, but with folk. But it's, I mean, it's the main thing that unites a lot of people, and to think that it's not going to get worse, I think, is ignorant. And you hope for it to be different, but I don't see anything that would indicate that this thing is going to slow down and be confined to these specific areas. So some of the intangible effects that you see, especially if the U.S. starts bombing oil field infrastructure, like our senators are calling for, is oil is going to spike big time. Then you're going to have domestic issues too. That would likely cause a recession pretty immediately. A lot of people think that we're already going in there. And it's wild. So there's a lot of the ideological tenets here too that cause the U.S. Civil War that you could play in here. And I think country by country, institution by institution, you're going to see a lot of division based off of political, religious, cultural issues. And I wouldn't be surprised with everything going on that you have certain states here in the U.S. talking about potentially, I don't know if full-on seceding from the Union, but basically going back to more of a states' rights perspective where they just disregard the federal government in certain areas. I don't believe that this will be looked on as a pleasant time in history for a lot of people. Someone like me is, I wouldn't say I'm excited, but I don't know what else to call it. Like, you know, expecting this sort of stuff to happen for years. It's part of what we've talked a lot about on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason that we have talked so much about religion too. And it's some crazy shit. So you know, we're at a point that as a country we might be in 4 crises in the next 2 years. A global war, internal civil war of sorts, where different factions are fighting against each other and really trying to find out what's what in terms of who has what power.
Right.
A financial crisis. And then also, I would say that the drug crisis that we're faced with right now is payback for the opium wars back in the day. It's really funded by China. So those are 4 flashpoints that it's interesting times, Mike. Things are going to change quite a lot over the next couple of years. And a lot of these institutions that we know are going to have to reshape themselves to survive. There's going to be a lot of crisis over the next 20 years. And I don't see there's people talking about full on war and basically instituting a draft right now. So that's going to piss a lot of people off, but it's really going to be hard to keep track of for most people what the heck is happening. And yeah, expect to see a lot more war movies.
If you would like to learn more about the New Next podcast, find us at thenewNextPodcast.com, where you can suggest a topic you would like for us to cover. If you enjoyed what you heard, share the podcast, tell a friend about it, or rate us with 5 stars.